how would you describe shiatsu for someone who doesn't really know what it is, according to your own experience, of course?
So for me, it's very much about opening yourself to the kind of communication that comes from feeling like you are an embodied being. I love that quote from Albert Einstein, that the intuitive mind is a sacred gift and the rational mind is a loyal servant. And our problem is that we've made the servant into the master. When you have shiatsu, you begin to reconnect with that intuitive mind, and you begin to redress that balance, the logical, rational mind, which tends to try to run everything in our lives, relaxes and this begins to remember that it can be a loyal servant. And that's when your life energy really starts connecting with your life and what you want to achieve in your life.
So you feel that, in a sense, the two kind of slip together, shiatsu and clean language?
Yes, there's so many different ways of using language to help people connect with the body. And in many ways, it's hard to see what's so different about clean language. Mm-hmm. But for me, the essence of it connects with energy work so well because it has this kind of Zen-like simplicity to the questions and an emphasis on that, a clarity and an emphasis on keeping the space completely clear as much as one possibly can, mm-hmm. of one's own presuppositions and desires to influence or to have any outcome whatsoever apart from the outcome that emerges from that clean space. So for me, it fitted with the Eastern philosophy better than anything else I'd come across. Mm-hmm. But having said that, of course, there are people who use focusing, people who use somatic experiencing, people who use the dialogue patterns in craniosacral therapy, and they work just as well for them because that's what they use.
How does one decide to write a book about clean language? How did you decide?
Well, I got to a point where I realized rather scarily that I knew clean language, I knew about shiatsu, and I knew that clean language fitted with shiatsu in a way that nothing else I'd come across did. And as I say, rather scarily, I gradually realized that I was actually the only person on the whole planet who knew enough about both of these things to write this particular book. And it was like a clear challenge, you know, either you do this or you don't. And I knew I had to do it. So I had written a regular column for a management magazine on thinking holistically for some time. I'm happy as a writer, but the challenge of doing a book, yes, I had to face that and I had to accept it. And it took 7 years to finish that book.
Wow. What was the biggest challenge?
Well, actually, the biggest challenge was the fact that my dad, being an academic, had written lots of books. And like most dads of his generation, hadn't been much of a family man. And so there was deep stuff that I needed to work my way through in order to get through the obstructions in the way of my writing a book. And when I meet people who write, have written 5, 10 books and they just do it so easily, I really admire them. But I'm also happy, very happy that I had to, had that challenge and I had to work through the challenge to be able to finish the book.
So in a way, you also discovered things while doing it.
Yeah,
while
very
writing.
much so. That
Um,
and I used a lot of clean language on myself to help me get through that. And there is even a little chapter in the book to demonstrate how to ask yourself clean questions, in which I am asking myself clean questions and discover something about the relationship with my father in there.
So it was a bit of therapy as well at the same time.
Yeah, and also coaching. I think the thing about clean language is that it has a large coaching element. It isn't about I will heal you. It's about let's create a space in which you have everything you need to help bring these things out in yourself. And that's a more coaching mentality. It's trusting the client to find the resources within themselves to be able to take whatever it is that whatever the next step is, and to feel safe enough to face whatever demons there may be in there that need to be faced.
I was amazed when I got to the point while reading your book that you mentioned the book Metaphors We Live by Lakoff and Johnson, because already for a few pages before that, for some reason I had it in my mind, and I got to my library that you see behind me, and I grabbed the book and I was like, okay, we're in sync. And I was wondering, because in their work, which is centered on the cultural side of metaphors and how ingrained they are in our culture, that led me to kind of wonder whether you have a favorite metaphor, or if there's one that you encounter more often than others in your receivers.
A favorite metaphor, I try not to have a favorite metaphor, but unconsciously I'm sure I do. And as I say in the book, one classic metaphor we all have is life is a whatever. Life is a battle, life is a struggle, life is a game, life is a cabaret. Life is a poor player that struts and frets his hour upon the stage, as Shakespeare's Macbeth says. We all have somewhere deeper embedded in us a metaphor for life. So, and I'm not sure what mine is, but if you ask me enough clean questions, I'd probably find out. But the sort of Buddhist side of that, the Zen side of that, is on what we try to do with clean language is to move even beyond the metaphors to what is beyond the words, what's beyond language. And that's where you get to this more kind of Zen place of life is. Life just is. It isn't anything, it just is. And that's where we're trying to go with clean language. Even, yes, in Shiatsu, if you bring the real Buddhist tradition behind it into the game, to use a metaphor.
I felt that your language was very easy to read in the book. And I was wondering, who would you recommend the book to? Who is it addressed to?
Well, obviously, the main target market for this book are people doing bodywork therapy, mind-body therapy, any professional practitioner who is interested in how language can help their clients develop a more embodied relationship with themselves, a more mindful relationship with their own body and energy. I would love it if people who receive bodywork got interested in the book as well, because there are many practical things you can do with clean language, just working with yourself. Maybe you could even give it to your therapist. I do have a couple of people who've emailed me and said, I loved your book, I gave it to my therapist.
You're gonna come to Athens in a month or so to present a seminar and then do a book presentation. What can people expect to hear from you during the seminar?
A bit of background about the neuroscience behind this mind-body connection, what we know now that we didn't know 50 years ago about how language emerges from the body in some way, and how language influences the body. And apart from that, I hope they don't hear very much more from me, because the whole point of what I'm doing is to find how these very simple, clean language questions help you listen to yourself. So I'll say a bit, but the main point of the workshop is for you to get a better sense of how to listen to yourself, and if you're a practitioner, how you can use these questions in a safe and compassionate way to help your clients listen to themselves.
Mm.
There are two other things I will be talking about, and one is how this how we can use mindfulness as a bridge between the verbal mind, the everyday mind which we manage our lives with, and is usually too busy to pay attention to the body. When the body has a problem, it usually just wants to take a pill or get it fixed so it can get on with everything else it has to do. That verbal mind, how mindfulness is a wonderful bridge between that and the kind of state your client needs to be in before a clean question really begins to have any real traction. So that's one thing. And the other thing is just to, again, to make it clear that language is probably only about 5% to do with words, and so much of it is non-verbal communication. So your client's gestures, especially when they're talking about a personal issue, a personal problem, are so eloquent and so true, and so unconscious, that I want to show you how you can bring clients' awareness to those, and then start to use them as a way of working with Ki.
How difficult or easy was it for you to start doing the method with clients that were used to you in another way, so before the clean language?
Yeah, that's a really important question. And apart from the fact that I think my clients were sort of used to me always trying something new, they knew, oh, Nick is always going to be trying something new. Apart from that, what I say, in order to respect your client, obviously, is just to explain to them, if you have learned this, or if you're new at it, you've done in the course something to do with how language helps you to connect with your Ki, would you be interested in trying it out? The questions may sound a bit funny, but I think you'll find they really help. That it's as simple as that. And it just comes back to basic good sense and respect. It's about, you're trying to change the contract a bit here, and so you shouldn't try to slip it underneath anything. You should be completely open and say to your clients, yeah, this is a new thing, would you like to try it?
Another thing I was wondering about is, how do you refrain yourself from applying clean language in your everyday life, like with your friends or family, or is it easy for you to separate the two?
Normal conversation is a game, a pretense that we think we understand what another person is saying. Actually, we have no idea what they really mean. If you ask a clean question, then you begin to get some idea of what they really mean. And what's even more important is they begin to have space to connect with what they really want to talk about. So that's why I would use it. But if you ask more than 2 or 3 clean questions in a row, people very quickly think, what's going on here? Unless there is an agreement, unless you've already said. So, again, in my book, I've got an example of when I was trying to ask my daughter, my teenage daughter, when she was looking pretty ropey and studying hard for exams, what was going on for her. And what was she doing? And but she was wise to this, and she knows her dad's a therapist, so she wasn't having any of it. And you just have to respect that.